forged in the fires of the socialist education system. Here's your host, Hippie Hyena. Welcome. Today, we're looking at the big one. Donald J. Trump. And in this video, he's going to try and prove that the J stands for genius.
Take a look at some of these charts.
I'd love to.
We're going to look.
Let's look.
And if you look at death,
It's started to go up again.
one.
Now, immediately, you've got a situation of this doddering old buffoon fumbling around with bits of paper which have been hastily printed out this morning from Microsoft Word, or possibly even OpenOffice. Other graph-making programs are available. And you have the interviewer here sort of treating Trump not like an equal, not like an adult, but as if he is a kind of not very bright toddler, trying to come up with excuses as to why he's pooped his own pants, which is exactly the sort of way you probably should deal with Trump.
Well, right here, the United States is lowest in numerous categories. We're lower than the world.
Lower than
We're
the
lower
world?
than
What is that?
Europe.
In what?
Look.
In what?
Take a look.
I think this speaks to the perceptual difficulties that a mind like Trump faces, you know. He's a person who lives in a world which is filled with people who are presenting him with ideas and information constantly. Presumably, as president, he's being constantly asked to intake some information, but he's a person who has no kind of degree of critical faculties through which to sort of understand that information. I think he only understands information as it sort of directly regards himself and his own popularity. He basically understands everything as a kind of either thumbs up towards him or a thumbs down towards him, and his reaction to a thumbs up towards him is to gloat and sort of wallow in it, and his reaction to a thumbs down towards him is to get sort of petty and petulant. But there's no getting petty and petulant over the complexity of a pandemic. So he's left kind of struggling to comprehend what's even happening. And I think there's also a situation of the people around him knowing that he can throw a tantrum and behave more erratically if he receives what he perceives to be a thumbs down. So they're constantly looking for ways to fiddle the information that they're giving him to make it look to him like it's a thumbs up. And the thing is, they don't really even need to try very hard. As you can see here, this graph could be decoded by your average secondary school student. For those of you who don't live in God's own country, the UK, I mean, around a 12-year-old could take a look at this graph and immediately see that there's information missing here, that it's incredibly misleading and not in a very convincing way. Anyway, it almost looks like the kind of thing that you'd give to a 12-year-old for them to have practice in pointing out the errors that people make in collating data. What you're seeing here is a bit like when a child is told an obvious fib by their parents, which they believe because they implicitly trust the authority of their parents, and then they end up going into a situation with a number of people who have a bit more of a critical perspective on those claims, and they express them, and the people around them are totally stunned that they believe this nonsense. But in Trump's case, it's not the authority of a parent that he trusts. It's just some slightly official-looking lines on a piece of paper. And to Trump, that looks like official information that he's being told. And you can see here, if you watch, that he's almost kind of outraged by the interviewer's suggestion that these random printouts that anyone could do shouldn't be trusted implicitly. I mean, it kind of suggests to me that Trump doesn't know how to work a printer.
Right here. Here's case death.
Oh, you're doing death as a proportion of cases. I'm talking about death as a proportion of population. That's where the US is really bad.
Well,
Much worse than South Korea, Germany, etc.
you can't do that. You have
Why
to go.
can't I do that?
You have to go by where. Look here.
Did you see it? Did he just see that stumble there in his words? What that was his mind struggling to keep up with his language. He wasn't able to think fast enough in order to produce the words. And the reason why that was happening is because he was suffering from a case of archetypical cognitive dissonance, where he has a strong belief in his effectiveness as a president, and he has this evidence in inverted commas, of this very dubious graph, and it was just pointed out to him why that graph was nonsense. So he'll be struck with an immediate feeling of discomfort as his mind wheels around trying to look for some kind of reason why that graph should be listened to. But of course there is none in reality. But here's the issue, he's not looking for evidence to base his opinions on, he's looking for excuses to justify his already established opinions. This is right-wing thought 101. It's just slightly more extreme and obvious in Trump's case.
Here is the United States. You have to go by the cases. The cases
Why
are
not
there.
as a proportion of
when
population?
We have somebody, what it says is when you have somebody that has, where there's a case, the people that live from those cases.
It's surely a relevant statistic to say if the US has X population and X percentage of death of that population versus South Korea.
No, because you have to go by the cases.
Well, okay, let's sort of look at this as if what Trump is saying isn't just hastily cobbled together babble to try and make himself look less stupid in the moment, which it undoubtedly is. But let's say there is a sort of line of reasoning here. Why would anyone care about the amount of people who've died per case? Now, under certain circumstances, like you might be trying to understand how the effectiveness of treatment of people who've got the sickness, you might think that those are relevant. If you're trying to sort of understand from a sort of medical perspective what kind of thing you might want to put into place to handle the patients brought in who test positive. But really that's it. Outside of that scenario, when you're president, you've got nothing to do with that. What you're in charge of is the management of the rules and regulations around social distancing or lack thereof, or testing being put into place and that sort of thing. In regard to Trump's job as president, the number of deaths per the infected is a total irrelevancy. It's a total irrelevancy. What's far more important is the way that Trump and his administration has so badly mishandled this pandemic that America has got 25% of all COVID deaths on the planet. Now that's not something that can be explained away by anything other than a policy decision. The policy decisions of that administration has led to vast numbers of deaths of its population. And you'd think that as a baseline, a government has a responsibility to keep its citizenry alive. This can't be reasonably interpreted in any other way as a catastrophic failure of governance on a level we've probably never seen before historically.
South Korea, for example, 51 million population, 300 deaths. It's like, it's crazy compared to...
You don't know that.
I do, it's on the...
You don't know that.
You think they're faking their statistics, South Korea?
I won't get into
country?
that because they have a very good relationship with the country. But you don't know that. And they have spikes. Look, here's
Germany,
one.
low, 9,000.
Here's one right here, United States. You take the number of cases. Now look, we're last, meaning we're first.
Last, I don't know what we're first in.
I mean, it's just embarrassing. He's just scrambling around with bits of paper in a similar way to the way that presumably the people who compiled these bits of paper were scrambling through bits of random data in order to find anything that might be able to be massaged into looking like America was number one in something. It's very odd from the perspective of a non-American citizen that Americans in general, correct me if I'm wrong, but they seem to have this weird notion that America's got to be number one in everything, or in anything they can find, which is a very curious and peculiar form of, well, mental illness. Because why? Who cares? I mean, that's a bit of a tangent there, but it does strike me as an oddity, and it's not just occurring in a vacuum. But in this particular case, in the face of sort of utter failure, they become more sort of desperately clawing through anything to try and find some metric by which they could be considered successful. I mean, this is the kind of thing that tends to happen in dictatorships. It happened under Mao in China, where Mao's government would refuse to tell Mao anything other than his policies were resulting in success. And it happened towards the end of Nazi Germany, where one of the reasons why they were sort of tactical failures is because they just couldn't accept any degree of information that suggested they weren't anything but number one. And this just goes to show the incredible weakness of fascism. It's so fragile, so unbelievably fragile, that it cannot face a single failure in itself, and therefore cannot deal with any failures and correct them into being successes. It's utterly incapable, and Trump, as a sort of poster child for it in the modern age, is utterly incapable of any form of self-analysis, self-critique, and therefore incapable of dealing with any challenging situation whatever.
As a what? Take a look. Okay. Again, it's cases. Okay. And we have cases because of the testing.
1,000 Americans are dying a day, but I understand on cases it's different.
No, but you're not reporting it correctly, Jonathan.
I think I am, but...
If you take a look at this other chart, look, this is our testing, I believe. This is the testing, yeah.
Yeah, we do more tests.
No, wait a minute. Well, don't we get credit for that? And because we do more tests, we have more cases. In other words, we test more, we have... Now, take a look. The top one, that's a good thing, not a bad thing. The top, Jonathan.
Now, here's another aspect of Trump's psychology laid bare, and more broadly, the psychology of the right wing. And you'll notice that he's saying because there's more testing, there's more cases, but what that doesn't take into account is that there is some degree of objective reality that those tests are trying to ascertain. From Trump's perspective and the perspective of the wider right wing, an objective reality is sort of unimportant. What constructs objective reality from their perspective is effectively spin, it's marketing, it's PR. It used to be that was a method by which you'd conceal and be dishonest about what was really going on. But it's become more and more the case in recent years that these sorts of demagogues have more and more got high on their own supply and started to see the marketing as reality itself. So when Trump says we've done more testing and that's why we've got more cases, it's not just that he's making an error about how data works, although he probably is doing that too. It actually reveals his philosophical perspective on what the fabric of the world is. And from his perspective, the lies of politicians construct reality like some kind of mind-bending Lovecraftian god.
If hospital rates were going down and deaths were going down, I'd say terrific. You deserve to be praised for testing, but they're all going up.
You know, they very rarely talk...
60,000 Americans are in hospital.
If you watch the news or read the papers, they usually talk about new cases, new cases, new cases.
I'm talking about death.
Well, you look at death. Death is way down from where it was.
It's 1,000 a day. It was 2,500. It went down to 500. Now it's going up again.
Excuse me. Where it was is much higher than where it is right now.
It went down, then it went up again.
But now it's going down again. It's going down in Arizona. It's going down in Florida.
Nationally,
it's going down in Texas. Take a look at this. These are the tests.
It's going down in Florida?
In the future, historians will look back on the Trump administration, and I think the biggest question on their minds is, was Trump some kind of 4D chess-playing genius, like the QAnoners would have us believe? Was he sort of, in a sense, playing a Columbo, where he pretends to be a sort of bumbling oaf, but in fact there's a kind of incredibly crafty method to his madness? Or in reality, was he just a sort of fumbling boob who had no idea what the hell he was doing, whose confidence is only matched by his incompetence, who is so stultifyingly stupid that it literally beggars belief that a human being could possibly be so stupid, and that the people who look up to him as being clever can only do so because they are even more stupid than that, and stupid to levels that we previously thought was impossible while still being able to have the capacity to breathe. And I think historians looking back and watching this footage, they will finally have a definitive answer. It's the second one. It's the second one.